signing is a very big deal, and the author we are here to meet shares her journey of faith and focus from being a little girl in Montego Bay to being known across the Anglican Communion, the halls of politics in the UK, internationally, and to us more intimately in this moment. Some people I'll be welcoming are physically present, while others are here virtually. So welcome to the Right Reverend Rose Hudson Wilkin, Bishop of Dover and Bishop of Montego. The reason that we are here together this evening. Welcome to Canon Karen Lawson Davis, Rector of St. David's Episcopal Church. And thank you for permitting us to host this event here at St. David's. Mrs. Camille McIntyre, welcome, and thank you for bringing your husband. Retired from the Diocese of New York, currently serving in the Diocese of Jamaica. Mrs. Enid Nesbitt and her husband, Canon J. Massey Nesbitt, retired rector of St. David's. The Very Reverend Dean Foster, Very Reverend Dr. Steve Foster, Dean of the Jamaica Deanery. Welcome. Reverend Keith Woods, Rector, St. Albans Church. Deacon Ricky Park. Carlos Moody and his wife, Moya Moody. Deacon Moya Moody. Reverend Maxine Barnett, my priest. All Saints Baldwin. Shirley Samuels, sister of Bishop Rose, and her husband Pete. The amazing members of the planning group for the Lead the Trail book tour. Fearless leader, Lorna Moody Jones. June Allison Gray. Baron Mellish, supported by his wife Audrey. Beth Ann Carbone, Janet Gordon, Carol Parker, Marcia Windhurst, Yvonne O'Neill, Anna Marie Clark, Marlene Mullings, Ansela Friday, Deborah Richburn, and Opal Sangster. I'd like to welcome sisters from Montego Bay High School who may be here, and from other schools, universities, colleges in Jamaica who are here to share this moment with us. Let me welcome those of us who grew up in youth fellowship together in Jamaica. I say Boca. yeah. And members of St. David's, who are always ready to support us. Members of other churches in the Jamaica Deanery and the Diocese of Long Island. Family, friends, welcome all. I trust that this will be an inspiring and uplifting experience for you. I'm so glad you're here. I have been asked to introduce Canon McIntyre, and he's kind of uncomfortable right now. So Canon Calvin McIntyre is known through the Diocese of Jamaica and Long Island and New York and pretty much everywhere. Everybody knows him. He is a committed clergy, man of God, and known for bringing levity to any situation. If you want to step things up, you call him. Master comedian, he can make a joke out of anything at all that you say, right? And above all, for me personally, Canon McIntyre is a friend of my husband and he and Camille. We really appreciate the relationship we had with them. We recently stayed in their home in Montego Bay and really enjoyed that hospitality. So I'm not going to say anything more that might freak him out. I have led the canon to prayer. Yeah. So thank you very much, and over to you, Canon McIntyre.
Wife, remember to collect rent from them. They're not paying it. Thank you very much, ma'am, for those few kind words. It's always a pleasure to hear your eulogy before you die, you know. So you can know who is telling lie. It's good to hear it. I'm extremely privileged to be in the company of my friend. I've been waiting for this day for a long time. As a matter of fact, this man died. And no sign of the body. People start getting very angry because, you know, in Jamaica, the funeral itself is not important. It's the feast of the living. When we have a funeral in Jamaica, goats suffer, cows suffer, chickens suffer, pigs suffer. So everybody was waiting, couldn't see this body come. So they grabbed onto the brother of the man who was the organizer of everything and decided to throw a few blows on him. Said, we have been waiting, we are hungry and all of that. Where's the man? And while all of this was going on, they saw the hearse coming up. And the guy said, look at that thing. We just asking about him. And see him coming there, he going to live long, you see. Well, Bishop Rose, you are not dead, but you know you're going to live long. Because you have to write more books. It is my pleasure to be here. I'm no stranger to this place. I used to come by when the Honorable Canon was here, and I would preach occasionally. Anytime I preach, you don't call me back for a year or so. I must say that my life is threatened because I played domino against the rector. I preached for the man this morning, you know, and I thought I did well. But he invited me to play domino with him, and I told him that when I went to seminary, I majored in domino and my minor was theology. I warned him, so I had to fix him up with 6 of the best. Now I'm supposed to preach for him next week. The man has forfeited the deal. Go back to Jamaica. One man was bright enough to say, I am inviting you. Oh, you should have heard the rector's reply. So I don't know where I'll be next week. Unless he changes his mind, and I'm praying earnestly that he changes his mind. Otherwise I have to go home and feed the dogs. And do all the things around the place. And I want my wife to go down and set it so that when the emperor arrives, I'm not going to be as terrible to say that we twain have become one and I am the one. I won't say that. The man was coming back from the wedding, and this is the last one I'm giving him. The man was coming back from the wedding, and he and his wife, and the wife was filled with glee and laughter. She caught the right brute and all of that. And as they went along, she said to him, darling, what a wonderful ceremony. And the grouchy man said, mm-hmm. He appeared as if he was dragged to the altar. Said, mm-hmm. She said the part that intrigued me most was when the priest looked at the two of us, 2 separate people, 2 individuals, and said, you 2 have become one. The man said, mm-hmm, but I am the one. I'm not so bright and bumptious. I know who's the one in my house. Anything go wrong is not me. It's the boss. I think I can say welcome to you. You have stayed in my house several times, and I've stayed in yours several times in England. but of course is the first we're staying together in this place. So a very warm welcome to you. Now, this is nothing short of a success story. The Reverend arrived in Montego Bay, young and dashing, and you had an afro then, eh? I'm certain you had an afro.
Was this in 1982?
Yes.
Did I have an afro?
You could pass with one. And so I was at the parish church as a young, handsome deacon. And this young lady came in dashing about ministry. She's serious about ministry, and she's ready to Christianize the whole place. After a while, she changed her mind. And she decided to go back to England. But before we get to that, tell us something of your very early bringing up. Primary school. I'm certain you went to one of those. As brilliant as you are, I don't think you just went straight to high school. I think you went to primary school. Tell us something about that.
I always like to begin by saying that I was lucky to have been born and brought up in Montego Bay, Jamaica. Because growing up there, I could see images of myself in all walks of life. And so you grow up knowing that you could become whatever you wanted to be. Our folks were not educated. They were educated in the school of life. And they always said to you, you need to go to school and get an education, because when you get your education, nobody can take it away from you. So that was always sort of seeded within you. So the early stage was the Seventh-day Adventist school, and there might be one or two people here, there certainly were this morning, who attended the local Seventh-day Adventist prep school with us. And then when St. Francis Mission was opened, they started their own prep school, and so our folks who were Anglicans moved us to St. Francis Prep School. And we had a wild time there. It was fun as children. And from there we went to Albion All-Age School. And walking from Glendevon to Albion, there's no sidewalks on the road. So, you have to walk properly on the road. And not only that, there was a fear in us as children, because the adults somehow knew who our parents were, or family members were. And so you were much more cautious about how you presented yourself on the road. Because if you misbehaved, not only might they tell you off, but you would hope that they don't tell your folks, because you would get into even greater trouble. So there was a lot of that. At St. Francis, the library van used to appear weekly, and we would get books. So I was a voracious reader, would take out 2 and then 4 books. I remember actually while I was at Albion School, making my way to the main library in Montego Bay and joining the library. And my folks were not impressed that I had done that. That is a big deal. You were going beyond what you should have done. But school was good. We had lots of fun. Right now in the UK, there's a lot of risk assessment when children need to go out and play. There were no risk assessments at Albion School. You learned which rocks to avoid, or which trees not to climb, or which side of the tree is the best bit to approach the tree from. And you have the marks, and I still have the marks on my knees and I can remember where each one of those came from. And that's how we learned, as it were, in terms of what hazards were there for us. From Albion School, I went to Montego Bay High School. But the journey before getting to that school was that my mother left when I was 2 years old. My sister was a little bit older than myself, and my sister. Do you remember Charlton and Carlton? Yes, one of them is here, and she hasn't seen him, or they haven't seen each other for over 50 years. So afterwards, you'll be able to say hello. So yeah, she came to the UK, and I gather that we were left with our father. And his sister apparently said, the man can't even look after himself, I pick him or look after. and so she assumed the responsibility of caring for us. And so my birth father was present, but not engaged. But I guess for me and for many others, there wasn't anything particularly different about that. I have a wonderful image of my father turning up at school, at Albion School. Can you remember? My father turned up at Albion School, and my father, do you remember, some of you might remember this poem, tourist white man wiping his face, met me in Golden Grove Marketplace. Exactly. Well, my father was like this banana man. So he was. He would wear tear-up clothes on the road and stain the stuff and box on his head. And I'm in the playground at Albion Old School. I looked up and glanced, and I could see my father with a box on his head, machete in his hand, tear up clothes, and my God, did I run. Unfortunately for me, my father saw me. And as I ran, I just heard this voice, Rose, away you are run from me far. So I had to walk all the way back to the gate, and all the children gathered. You know him? Are you father? So those were fun days. I look back now and I can laugh. I wasn't laughing at the time. I was probably 6, 7, that sort of age group. But I remember going back and saying to my aunt, my father come to school and embarrass me. But life was interesting. My mother eventually came back. And that was the first time I was having any awareness of my mother. Because when you're 2 years old, you don't actually remember. So there was never any bonding there. But in my head, she was my mother, and I can still see her in the rocking chair and standing there thinking, gosh, she's my mother, she's pretty. But there was nothing emotional. And I don't think that is unusual for many of my generation, because many of that parent generation left to go to America or to the UK. And I often wonder whether or not the experience of enslavement had something to do with that, the way in which we so readily parted with our children and left them in someone else's care. Maybe it was necessity, I don't know. But it was an interesting experience. My mother came back, and then life was not the same again. Because sadly, when she came back, she took us, my sister and I, to live with her in Kingston. And that was not a great experience. When she went to the UK, she met someone else. She wasn't married to my father, so she met someone else, a handsome, tall young man. They got married and they started a family. And so my experience of that was very much a Cinderella experience. And that was challenging. And then within approximately a year of great brutality, and again, I have to wonder whether enslavement was part of that DNA in our DNA. And so I was sent back to Montego Bay to restart my life there without my wonderful sister, and life goes on. But during those days back in Montego Bay, church played an important role, because Sunday school and the environment of loving, caring people within that church setting did its job. I was presented with a God of love, and that was what I needed, and that was very special. And it was during those formative years that I felt a call to ministry, at a time when the church said, "You're a girl, you're not allowed."
I need to ask you about who could have influenced you most at that time. But to comment on the brutality you mentioned, it was commonplace. I had a mother who would beat retroactively. If she didn't catch her this time. If she didn't catch her this time, she would use a woman's favorite word. You remember? But
or I don't eat rice when it's hot.
That's right. My mother had a lot of cold rice. Now, can you point to one person in your life in those formative years that could have been of great influence and example, especially spiritually, that caused you to enter into ministry?
I don't think it's just one. I think there was a number of people. I think of Ms. Annette Mellish, who we saw earlier on today. There was Faith Jolly. There was Mr. Corbett. There was Horace Whittingham. So there were more than one person who lived faith, encouraged faith, nurtured, supported, and was a great encouragement to myself, and I'm sure to many others as well.
You were very privileged to have gone to the first high school for girls built by the government, under the supervision of the Archdeacon of Cornwall. Now, tell us a little about your life and experience at high school.
I always say that high school was an interesting experience. It was the 11 plus exam that you took in order to get there. So passed the 11 plus exam, started in the A stream, ended up in the X stream. There was a 4X. Was it 4X? Yes, 4X. Yes. And I think part of that reason was, although our folks wanted us to do well educationally, they didn't know that they had a part to play in that. And so we had to do endless chores. What is it about our people with cleaning? Oh my goodness. You know? We had to clean. They had to see their face in the floor. You had to shine it. You had to put the red polish on. And then you had the coconut brush. You know? And then we had no water immediately in the house. So we had to go and fetch water. So we had the oil drum pan near the house that we had to fill up. And if you were small, you began with the cheese tin. You know that cheese tin? And you graduated to buckets, and the buckets got bigger the older you get. So you had to do all those things. By the time you have done all that every day, or we had to go and get firewood as well. I used to have nightmares. I think the nightmares only stopped in the last maybe 10 years. I was still having nightmares about that hill, that gully that we had to go down as children to get the firewood. So there was all those challenges, I think. And so by the time you came back, there was no time to do homework. And actually, when they were going to bed, and they went to bed early, light was going off. You know? So we didn't have that level of support. So whatever you attained, you had to do it at school, and when school over, you had to get back home. No time around, hanging around school. They were marking clock. So there are all those challenges. But I had some wonderful friendships at school, and that helped. That helped. So I think throughout life, one gets the sense and experience of hardships. There's a wonderful poem, life for me ain't been no crystal stairs. That's what it was like. But it was good because we had teachers who were interested in us. I think they were interested in us. And they were teachers who were not just teaching their subjects. They were teachers who wanted you to make sure your uniform was appropriately, not sort of looked as if you had been sleeping in it, you know? So they were genuinely interested, so that helped as well.
Well, you have answered another question for me. I've always wondered why Jamaican families, father and mother, have so many children. But you say they go to bed early.
I could not comment on that.
No, I'm gonna be able to say no, man. Bishop, tell us about your call, because you were first at Church Army, sister, and the training and your experience being a woman of color, a black woman in a society that was basically white, especially where you went.
Well, when, as a young person growing up, we were very much involved. Mr. Campbell is over there, Boca, you're still there. And, you know, Anglican Youth Fellowship, and we had a quarterly deanery service, youth service, all of that involvement. So I like to think that I cut my teeth for ministry involved in those ways. And there was a real sense in which I became aware that church, we are taught the sacraments are important. And yet I knew that there were churches that went for 6 months, 9 months, because they had no priest. And in a conversation I had with Bishop D'Souza at the time, I said, how is it that you've told us that the sacraments are important, and yet these places have no communion, Holy Communion? And, you know, of course we need priests. I said, but we have all these women. We have all these women in our churches. They open the churches, close the churches, clean the churches. They did everything. So why can't they? And I don't know whether he thought I was heading in that direction, but he said, Rose, we're Anglicans, we don't do that. And I remember thinking to myself, you may not do that, and the church may not do that, but I know that God does that. God calls men and women to ministry. And so, knowing that the church did not accept women in the priestly ministry, the next thing for me was the church army. And I knew that the church army had women. And the church army were always trained in the UK. And so I applied the year I finished high school. My folks couldn't afford to keep me on to do A-levels. So I finished my O-levels and then worked for a year. And during that year applied for the church army, was accepted and went off to the UK. My husband, who was a year ahead of me at the college, it wasn't my husband then, but he says he remembers helping to take my luggage when I arrived at the college. I have no recollection of him.
He has been paid off.
I have no recollection of him at all there. I found it quite challenging when I got there. First of all, I wondered where the houses were, because everything was sort of bricks and red bricks or gray and smoke coming out of it. And I'm accustomed to colors, brightly colored homes. You know, where are the houses? And I said, no, those are factories. But they were houses. And then I would see people running. And I'm saying, why are people running? Where's the fire? And I asked one woman, and she said, we're running to get the train. And how odd, in Jamaica the train would wait for you. You know? So there were different things to get used to. And then I think there is this underlying level of racism, which although we would like to think is completely gone, it's not gone. It's deep in the psyche. It's deep in the psyche, and unless we open the bottle and look at it, look at what we're thinking, why we're thinking it, and deal with those issues, it's still going to be there in years to come. So yes, I had challenges in my ministry there, challenges where people say, we don't want her to do our family member's funeral because she's black, and it hurts. That sort of rejection hurts, but I never let them see that I am hurt by it. That's important for me anyway. But I pull myself together and I say, you know what, Rose, you do a damn good funeral. So they are missing out on having the best funeral ever. So that's what I
When I was going to synod in the 60s as a youngster, and I remember Bishop Sway, who was way ahead of his time, contemplating the ordination of women. And a priest got up, somebody you know very well, of blessed memory, I hope blessed memory. And he said, Bishop, I don't even want a woman to sit on my bed, much more to serve me at the altar. What if she gets pregnant? And a wise clergyman, whom you also know, got up and said, my Lord Bishop, you have heard of the church militant, you have heard of the church triumphant, that will be the church expectant. Okay, you have told us that Blessed Ken helped you to unload your luggage,
Yes,
and you have rewarded him graciously. And I can tell you, Bishop Rose has some lovely children. Lovely children. And they're even lovelier because they call me Uncle Calvin. We have come a long way.
we have.
Now, tell me about you wanting to leave Jamaica because things were so slow, especially moving towards ordination of women. Is it that you got fed up and decided to leave, or what drove you to back to England?
I think I was just being a dutiful wife, so never let it be said that she was not a dutiful wife.
Amen.
There you go.
Grant it, Lord.
Yes.
Yes.
He wanted to go back to his home country to train for ordination and didn't think it was fair for the Jamaican church to spend their meager resources on him. And so I followed him back.
Wonderful. But tell us now, you were bold enough to ask for acceptance into the priesthood. Tell us about that.
Well, when women were now being ordained as deacons when I went back to the UK. And so I offered to be part of the discernment process and was told basically when I went to see the DDO, the Director of Ordinance, that and the examining chaplain as well, that I ought to be at home looking after my husband and my child. I had one child by then. And I was not having any of that nonsense from them. So I said to them, my husband is perfectly capable of looking after himself. And had I not thought about how I was going to manage with my daughter, I would not have offered. And so nothing happened for quite a while. And when they eventually called me back, I was now pregnant with number 2. And I thought, I'm not going to tell them. Because if they said what they said when there was only 1, what are they going to say when it's 2? But again, they dragged their feet so much, so that I was 2 weeks away from delivering by the time my appointment was to see them. So I walked in and I said to it was a guy, I said, I hope your midwifery skills are intact because I gather you can deliver either side of the state. But he was brilliant. He never asked me anything about childhood and looking after children. We talked theology and he said yes. But then we had to move diocese, so the whole thing started all over again. But eventually I was ordained a deacon, and it was 1994 when women were first allowed to be priests in the Church of England that I was ordained a priest.
I heard that you were in the company of the Archbishop when a certain young man turned up that you didn't know was there. Tell us about the reaction before I have to tell them.
I think I'm going to leave it for you to tell that story.
She was standing with the Archbishop about to take a picture. And she didn't know I was there. And I just walked right up. And she ran away from the Archbishop. I literally caught her in midair. And she asked, when you came here? I said, I arranged with Kenan Ramsey, and we pulled it off very nicely. She didn't know I was in the procession, she didn't know I was there, but it was a special moment for me to be part of history. And to see the little girl, she wasn't the little girl from Montego at that time, but to see her move into the category and realm and so on, and the rest is almost history there.
A great and mighty Redeemer, miracle worker and friend, is Jesus Christ the Savior. On him we all can depend. He left his home in glory to live on earth among man. He suffered the indignity of being whipped and even spat upon. He lived his life unselfishly. No, he didn't count the cost when he gave it up for us freely, so that mankind won't be lost. Jesus is mighty, 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 mighty to save. Oh, Jesus is mighty, mighty, mighty to save. Oh, Jesus is mighty, 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 mighty to save. Jesus is mighty.